Good morning and welcome to, well, what do we call it now? It has been Liverpool Transfer Daily. The transfer window, of course, has slammed shut in the common parlance, so Liverpool Daily News perhaps. But whatever the stream is called now, we're here. I'm here with Ben Bocsak. We're both from Liverpool.com, and we're here to keep you up to date with all of the latest Liverpool goings on. Some of them are still transfer related, some of them less so. Ben, first of all, I haven't spoken to you since the last game, since the Merseyside derby. So before we dive into the talking points from today, I'll just quickly get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean the game itself wasn't that disappointing. I think in the greater context, that's the issue where Liverpool will feel a bit bitter about it. A draw in itself at Goodison Park away in a game which Liverpool could have easily won, of course easily lost as well, is not a bad result. But it's the fact that Liverpool have already dropped 9 points this season, and I think that's the disappointing part about it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I've just seen Kumar in the chat saying, "Hi lads, morning Kumar. Good to have you as always." Remember, everyone, just feel free to drop your comments in the chat on what we're talking about or on anything Liverpool related. And if there's anything of note, then we'll bring it up and we'll have a chat about it. It's always nice to hear from you all. So moving on from the Merseyside derby, one of the talking points for today is the Champions League squad. I don't know whether any of you will have seen that, but the big news out of the Champions League squad is the exclusion of both Naby Keita and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Ben, those are two big senior players to not even make the squad, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's unsurprising though, given the length of their injuries. It seems like Keita might be out for a long while, and Chamberlain as well. We know already he's going to be out for some time. And, given the fact that this is a condensed Champions League group stages, with the World Cup going on in November and December, it's unsurprising that Liverpool decided not to risk them and put them in the squad. Of course, if they are still here after January, I'm sure they will be in the squad if they're fit and ready in the next round, should Liverpool qualify as well, of course.
Of course, yeah. I suppose that is the main point to raise, the condensed group stage that has maybe been overlooked in some quarters. So I think you're right to bring it up. I think it's all over by November the 1st or something. So, it does mean that the injury timescale is not ideal, because that's still, a couple of months away. And particularly with Keita, we didn't know yet whether the injury was quite that bad. It now seems that it is, which is a shame. I suppose the inevitable question it begs is whether Liverpool did enough in the window in terms of midfielders. I know it's ground we've been over, but this kind of latest confirmation of the extent of the senior midfielders being injured, do you think that changes the picture at all for you in terms of what Liverpool did or didn't do?
Not necessarily. I think Liverpool have done enough. I think they could have signed a better profile perhaps than Arthur, but I think Arthur's arrival shows that Liverpool will have enough options, going forward into the season. Possibly another midfielder could have been a good addition and maybe needed, but I'm not overly concerned about that, especially since now Thiago's coming back. I think Henderson will be back in a few weeks' time as well. And I think that makes it less of a concern. Now the priority should be on keeping the players fit and making sure they don't pick up any other injuries. But yeah, I think Liverpool did the best they could in the time that they had left in the window. Obviously, you can talk about hindsight and say they should have prepared better and reacted, perhaps had a better alternative when Aaron Tchouameni rejected the club. But that's in the past, and I think Liverpool will just want to move on, like Klopp said before. Once the transfer window is over, he'll just look at his squad and he'll deal with the players that he has at his disposal. And I think, there's no point dwelling in the past. I'm sure Julian Ward is already working on fixing the situation in the future.
And as some people are saying, it maybe wasn't the biggest shock in the world. Neither of them made the squad. Kumar says that was inevitable. Leaving out Naby and Ox is not a surprise for anyone. Someone else, maybe a bit less generously, says did Naby and Ox even play for Liverpool? But yeah, the fact does remain that it's not a huge shock when they're injured anymore. So Liverpool will know that that's always a risk. An interesting point from Bruce here. He says that's quite telling. Surely Liverpool will not be looking to extend their contracts. I suppose just the last point on these two, Ben. Do you think that these latest injuries do change the contract picture?
I think it's a tough one. I think possibly so. I mean, they're both in the last year of their contracts. They've had a fair few years at Liverpool now with this recurrent theme of getting injured, playing a few games, getting injured again. I think it does change the picture. I don't think necessarily that Liverpool were thinking about potentially extending their contracts anyway. I think with the latest rumours around Keita, it seems like he seems pretty keen to move somewhere else. And with Oxlade-Chamberlain, the fact that he is going to be 29, that changes the picture for him. I think Liverpool are unlikely to extend the contract of a 29-year-old who is so injury prone and who is, just injury prone and not very reliable at all. So I think Liverpool were already kind of thinking about it that way anyway, because this is not a new thing. They've always been injury prone, and it doesn't seem like that's ever going to change. So for me, it doesn't change anything. I think Liverpool will just continue with what they planned, which is probably not to extend their contracts.
And the question now that everyone's asking is, well, what is the plan for next year, potentially even for January? We're going to go on to talk about one potential option that there has been some murmurings about shortly. Before we do, I'm going to quickly go over some of the suggestions we've had in the chat. Someone says, let Naby and Ox go, get Tielemans and Louise for free. That would be an interesting one. Both of them, of course, into the last years of their contracts as well. Another shout we've had, just lost it for a second. Someone has suggested Houssem Aouar. Oh yeah, Kyle has said we should get Houssem Aouar next year. He seems to be one who's been perennially linked to the Premier League, most often to Arsenal, but still staying put at Lyon for the time being. Ben, any of those names catch your eye?
I mean, I'm not quite convinced by Tielemans and how they don't seem to have the defensive qualities I think that Liverpool need. I think Tielemans in particular, I mean, it's harsh to judge him off of Leicester this season, but even in the past couple of seasons, he's stagnated a lot. I think he'll be demanding very high wages when he does move on a free contract. I think Liverpool will be reluctant to extend that to provide him with those wages. Then I think Diaz, he's not a bad player as a squad player. I think on a free contract that would be a shrewd piece of business. But other than that, I think there are better options out there, and I think Liverpool will have to spend a bit as well in January and in the summer if they want to make sure that they have the right profiles and the right players.
Yeah, the free transfers are always tempting, but a lot of the time there's a reason they're free transfers. Of course, there's some exceptions to that rule. Joel Matip, of course, one of the greatest free transfer signings of recent times. James Milner maybe isn't the favourite person at Liverpool at the moment, but it doesn't change the fact that he has given years of excellent service, even if those powers are waning. And also, you could say it's not really his fault that Klopp's playing him every game, which should never really have come about for a 36-year-old. But if Liverpool are spending the money or are going to be spending the money, one name that has been doing the rounds quite significantly is Moises Caicedo. Kumar has asked in the chat, do you think we'll go for Moises Caicedo? And as it happens, that is our next main topic of discussion for the morning stream. Reports out of Ecuador saying that both Liverpool and Manchester United are keen on Caicedo. Ben, well, first of all, what do you make of him as a player?
I mean, he's a great player. I think if Liverpool are to replace Naby Keita, I think he's the perfect replacement. He presses high. he presses well. He's got a lot of energy. He's good on the ball. And as we saw at the weekend, he can get goals as well. A lovely finish against Leicester in Brighton's 5-2 win, and he was top class again. And I definitely think he's a profile that suits Liverpool very well. I'm not surprised Klopp is a fan. Of course, he's had very little time still in the Premier League, so Liverpool don't necessarily have the biggest sample to go off of, but it is very impressive. And I'm sure Liverpool, he's the type of profile that Liverpool would want, and I'm sure Liverpool are keeping an eye on him. It's just whether how much Brighton are willing to let him go for. I mean, Graham Potter was asked about it in the transfer window. He said 42 million or something like that will only get his boot. So obviously Brighton are holding out for a high fee, and I think that's going to be Liverpool's main obstacle in trying to get him.
And do you think briefly that Manchester United could be another obstacle? I mean, it's early days in the season, but they're of course higher up the league now, and they've always had the money to spend. Do you think, come next summer or whenever it may be, they're a genuine transfer rival for Liverpool now?
I think they've always have been. I mean, they've tried to go for targets, and obviously they can rival Liverpool in terms of the financial aspects, but I still think it's early days. Let's wait and see how Ten Hag does. Obviously, he got a good victory against Arsenal, but he also lost 4-0 to Brentford. So yeah, it's very early days. I think it will just depend on whether Manchester United have Champions League football, how they perform this season. But I still think Liverpool is by far the better sell. If I was a player, I would much rather work with Jurgen Klopp than Erik ten Hag.
Well, that seems like a nice positive note to end on. Someone says, I love how we start these links after transfer windows closed, too little too late. I assure you we have been going over these links all summer while the transfer window was open as well, but they never stop. The links have inevitably continued, and we'll keep you up to date with all of them as they continue to flood in. And, it's only 118 days until January, and then we can do it all over again with the window open. But for the time being, thank you everyone for your comments. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out all of our content over the day on Blood Red and on Liverpool.com. Thanks a lot.